So solving an inequality is very similar to solving an equation. The majority of the steps are the same. There's just a couple little differences that you need to be aware of before you get too far into them. The difference between an inequality and an equation is that an inequality, your answers use the inequality symbols. We've got less than or equal to, greater than, or greater than or equal to, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in depth. Basically, an inequality gives you a range of answers. So instead of getting a solution like x equals 4, you're going to get something more like x is less than 4, which means any number less than 4 will work as a solution. 3, 2, 1, all the decimals and fractions in between, all the negatives, anything smaller than 4 is going to work. The equal to symbols here and here, they work in a similar fashion, except it allows you one more solution. So if I were to solve out my inequality and get something like x is less than or equal to 5, that means all of the numbers less than 5, all the decimals, fractions, negatives, all that stuff is a solution, but then so is the number 5 itself. So the equal to's literally mean your solution can be equal to 5 as well, or whatever your number is. As far as solving the inequality, it is primarily the same as solving an equation. The only difference is what you do at the very end of that solution process and what you do with your answer. So solving this just like an equation, I've got a couple of variable terms to combine. So when I add those together, I get 5v is greater than or equal to 20. Divide out your 5, just like you would if it were an equation. V is greater than or equal to 4. So what I'm going to do with that is, in a picture, show all of the possible solutions to that. So the 4 is the important number here, and I want all of the solutions that are bigger than 4. So I'm going to shade this entire number line to the right. Now, what I was saying earlier about the equal to part of this, the bar underneath, means that my solution can also include the number 4, so I'm going to fill in that circle. The equal to's, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, you fill in the circle to show the equality. If it's strictly less than or strictly greater than, you're going to leave that circle open. Shading in the end of the number line shows that this thing goes on forever, and I have all of the solutions out there to the right. 10, 11, 12, 15 million, they're all possible solutions. The only difference between solving an inequality and solving an equation as far as the process goes is at the very end of your process, if you have to divide by a negative, you have to turn your inequality symbol to point the other direction. And that's what's going to happen here on this one. So when I distribute, just like you would if you were solving an equation, subtract your 10, just like you would if you were solving an equation. Divide by negative 35, just like you would if you were solving an equation. But here's the difference. Because I divided by a negative, my inequality symbol is going to point the other direction. That's what you have to pay attention for when you're solving these things. If you divide by a negative as that last step, if you divide by a positive, nothing changes. It's when you divide by a negative, it turns everything upside down, and you literally flip your symbol around. So negative 3, I want everything smaller than negative 3. So all these little fractions and decimals out here, everything to the left, and then shade in your arrow at the end. Okay. The other special cases happen when the variable cancels itself out. These happen when you solve an equation too, but it's a little more obvious when you're solving an inequality. So you go through the process exactly the same. Combine like terms, subtract, divide, all that jazz. So when I combine my 8x's here, well, 8x minus 8x cancels out, and I'm left with this statement. 2 is less than 2. That makes no sense. That is a false statement. So what that means is we have no solution to this inequality. Nothing works as an answer. This symbol right here, the circle with the slash through it, means no solution. Saves you from having to write it out. So there's nothing to graph down here. Now, the one on the right, distribute to get rid of your parentheses. Subtract to 6r, either one, and you're left with something similar to the last one, but a little bit different. The difference is this statement is true, which means absolutely every real number is a solution to that inequality. So we can shade in our number line. I'm okay if you just write all real numbers, but you could shade in your number line to represent it as well. Okay, if you're not familiar with this, real numbers are the numbers that we use when we do basic math and algebra. There is a concept called imaginary numbers, which you will learn more about in high school. To be honest with you, when you get into Algebra 2 and Trig, you'll learn about imaginary numbers.